I sat alone at my own daughter's wedding reception, tears streaming down my face, when a stranger leaned over and whispered words that would change everything. What I discovered that night didn't just break my heart. It led me to expose a secret so devastating that half the guests walked out before the cake was even cut. I'm grateful you're here to listen. Stay with me until the end, and please comment which country you're watching from so I can see how far my story reaches. I never imagined that at 73 years old, I would be fighting for basic dignity at my own child's wedding. But then again, I never imagined a lot of things about how my life would turn out. My name is Eleanor Fitzgerald, though most people call me Ellie. I've lived in Riverside Heights, a modest neighborhood in the outskirts of Portland, for the past 40 years. My small two-bedroom house has peeling paint and a garden that's more weeds than flowers these days. But it's mine. Every mortgage payment, every repair, every improvement, I earned it all through hard work and sacrifice. I raised my daughter Cassandra alone after my husband, James, died in a construction accident when she was only 6 years old. One moment we were a complete family planning our future, and the next I was a widow with a first grader who kept asking when Daddy was coming home. The life insurance barely covered the funeral costs. I had no college degree, no professional skills, and a daughter who needed everything from school supplies to emotional support I wasn't sure I knew how to give. But I did what mothers do. I figured it out. I took a job cleaning offices for Riverside Commercial Services, working the night shift from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. During the day, I waitressed at Maggie's Diner on 5th Street, slinging hash browns and coffee to construction workers and truck drivers. I slept in 4-hour increments, survived on too much caffeine and not enough rest, and somehow managed to be present for every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every moment that mattered to Cassandra. She was a bright child, always curious, always reading. Even as a little girl, she'd talk about the big house she'd live in someday, the important job she'd have, the life of luxury that would be nothing like our crammed rental apartment and secondhand everything. I encouraged those dreams. I wanted more for her than I had had. So when she got accepted to Westmont University on a partial scholarship, I worked extra shifts to cover the rest. When she needed a car to commute to her internship, I took out a loan I'm still paying off. When she graduated and moved to Seattle for her marketing career, I sent her money whenever she asked, even when it meant eating ramen for a week. Cassandra thrived in Seattle. She climbed the corporate ladder at Huntington and Reeves' marketing firm, bought herself a sleek apartment in the Belltown neighborhood, and cultivated a social media presence that made her life look like something out of a magazine. Designer clothes, trendy restaurants, weekend trips to wine country. Her Instagram was a highlight reel of success. I was proud of her. Of course I was. Everything I'd sacrificed had been worth it to see my daughter living the life she'd always dreamed about. But somewhere along the way, the phone calls became less frequent. The visits stopped altogether. When I'd suggest driving to Seattle to see her, there was always a reason why it wasn't a good time. Work was crazy, she had travel plans, her apartment was being renovated. The excuses piled up like unpaid bills, and eventually, I stopped asking. Then, 14 months ago, Cassandra called with news that made my heart soar. She was engaged. "His name is Derek Pemberton, Mom," she said, her voice bubbling with excitement I hadn't heard in years. "He's an executive at Pemberton Industries. His family is very prominent in Seattle. We're getting married next fall at the Silverstone Manor. It's going to be absolutely beautiful." I cried happy tears that night, alone in my little house, imagining my daughter in a white dress, finally finding the happiness and security she deserved. But as the wedding planning progressed over the following months, those happy tears would turn bitter. "What about the rehearsal dinner?" I asked, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. "That's immediate family only, just the wedding party and parents." Relief washed over me. At least I'd be included in that. But 2 weeks before the wedding, I got another call. "Mom, I need to talk to you about the rehearsal dinner," Cassandra began, her voice carrying that careful tone people use when delivering bad news. "Vivian is hosting it at her country club, the Cascade Heights Club. And the thing is, there's a dress code. Very formal. Black tie optional actually means black tie required, if you know what I mean." "I can get a nice dress," I said, though my stomach was already sinking at the thought of the expense. "It's not just that. The club is very exclusive. They have certain standards. And Derek's family will have a lot of their social circle there. Business partners, investors, people who matter to Derek's career. The unspoken message was clear. I didn't fit that world, and my presence might be embarrassing. So, what are you saying, Cassandra? She sighed. I'm saying maybe it's better if you just come to the ceremony and reception. The rehearsal dinner is going to be very formal and political anyway. You'd probably be bored. The knife twisted a little deeper into my heart. You don't want me at your rehearsal dinner. Mom, don't be dramatic. I'm trying to make this easier for you. Easier for me or less embarrassing for you? I don't have time for this, Cassandra snapped, her voice going cold. The wedding is in 2 weeks. I have a million things to deal with. I'm trying to blend two families and manage everyone's expectations, and you're making this about you. I'm your mother, Cassandra. I raised you. I worked 2 jobs to put you through college, and now I'm not good enough to attend your rehearsal dinner? I'll see you at the ceremony, Mom. I really have to go. She hung up before I could say anything else. I sat in my quiet kitchen, the phone still in my hand, and felt something crack inside my chest. This was my daughter, my only child, the little girl who used to curl up in my lap and tell me I was the best mommy in the world. When had I become someone she was ashamed of? The wedding day. The morning of November 12th arrived cold and gray, matching my mood. I'd barely slept, anxiety churning in my stomach like spoiled food. I'd bought a new dress for the occasion, navy blue with a modest neckline and 3/4 sleeves, the nicest thing I'd owned in a decade. It had cost $200 at Nordstrom Rack, which was more than I usually spend on clothes in 6 months. But I wanted to look presentable. I wanted Cassandra to be proud to call me her mother, even if she was trying to hide me. I'd also splurged on getting my hair done at a real salon instead of cutting it myself like I usually did. The stylist, a young woman named Jamie with pink streaks in her hair, had been kind and chatty, giving me soft curls and pinning them back with a small crystal clip. "You look beautiful," she had said when she was done. "Your daughter is going to cry when she sees you." I smiled and thanked her, not mentioning that Cassandra probably wouldn't see me until the ceremony, and even then, only from a distance. The drive from Riverside Heights to Seattle took 3 hours. I'd left early, not wanting to risk being late, and arrived at the Silverstone Manor with time for spare. The venue was even more impressive than the photos I'd seen online. A sprawling estate with manicured grounds, a grand stone facade, and more luxury cars in the parking area than I'd seen in my entire life. I felt profoundly out of place as I walked up the marble steps to the entrance, my sensible shoes clicking against stone that probably cost more per square foot than my entire house. Inside, the foyer took my breath away. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, enormous floral arrangements, white roses, orchids, and cascading greenery occupied every corner. Everything gleamed and sparkled, from the marble floors to the gold-framed mirrors on the walls. Staff members in crisp uniforms directed guests towards the ceremony site or the cocktail area. I followed signs towards the bridal suite, my heart pounding. Surely Cassandra would want to see me before the ceremony. Surely there would be a moment, however brief, where I could tell her how beautiful everything looked and how proud I was of her. The bridal suite was on the 2nd floor, behind an ornate board marked "Private Wedding Party Only." I hesitated, then knocked softly. A young woman I didn't recognize opened the door, one of the bridesmaids, dressed in an emerald green gown with her hair already styled in an elaborate updo. "Can I help you?" she asked. Not unkindly, but with the clear implication that I didn't belong there. "I'm Eleanor, Cassandra's mother. I just wanted to see her before the ceremony." The bridesmaid's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, let me check." She partially closed the door, and I could hear murmured conversation inside, laughter, music playing, the sound of champagne glasses clinking. The door opened wider, and there stood a woman I'd never met but recognized from photos Cassandra had posted online. Vivian Pemberton, Derek's mother. She was tall and elegant, probably in her early 60s, but preserved in that way wealthy women achieve through expensive skincare and regular cosmetic procedures. Her hair was styled in a perfect silver bob, her makeup flawless, and she wore a champagne-colored gown that probably cost more than 3 months of my mortgage payments. "Eleanor," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "How lovely to meet you finally. Cassandra is just in the middle of having her makeup finished. Perhaps you could come back in 30 minutes?" It wasn't a suggestion.
"I just wanted to say hello," I said, trying to see past her into the room where I could glimpse Cassandra sitting in front of a large mirror surrounded by people. "Of course, and you will, at the ceremony. Right now, we're trying to keep things calm and focused, you understand?" Vivian's tone was pleasant but firm. "The photographer is capturing the getting ready process, and we want to maintain the aesthetic." The aesthetic. I wasn't part of the aesthetic. "Perhaps you could check on the guest book table?" Vivian continued, her hand on the door preparing to close it. "I believe it's near the ceremony entrance. It would be wonderful to have someone making sure everything is in order there." She was giving me a task, treating me like a helpful volunteer rather than the mother of the bride. Before I could respond, Cassandra's voice called from inside. "Who is it, Vivian?" "Just someone checking on details, darling. Nothing to worry about. Focus on your makeup." The door closed with a soft but definitive click. I stood in the hallway staring at that closed door, feeling smaller than I'd felt in decades. Inside that room, my daughter was preparing for the most important day of her life, surrounded by people who weren't me. And I'd been sent away like an unwanted solicitor. I walked back downstairs on legs that felt unsteady, past couples in expensive clothes chatting and laughing, past staff members carrying silver trays of champagne, enormous flower arrangements that cost more than I made in a month. The guest book table was exactly where Vivian had indicated, a small table near the ceremony entrance with an elegant leather-bound book and an expensive fountain pen. Everything was already perfectly arranged. There was nothing that needed checking. She'd simply wanted me out of the way. I adjusted the angle of the pen, straightened the book that didn't need straightening, and blinked back tears that threatened to ruin the makeup I'd so carefully applied that morning. "Excuse me, are you at the wedding party?" I turned to find a middle-aged couple looking at me expectantly. The woman wore a burgundy dress and a friendly smile. "I'm the bride's mother," I said, and the words felt strange in my mouth, like a title I wasn't sure I had the right to claim anymore. "Oh, how wonderful! You must be so excited. Cassandra is such a lovely young woman. I work with Derek at Pemberton Industries. I'm Sharon Caldwell, and this is my husband, Martin." We shook hands, and they made polite small talk about what a beautiful venue it was and how elegant everything looked. They were kind, these strangers, kinder than my own daughter had been. When they moved on to find their seats, I remained by the guest book table, watching as the ceremony space filled with guests. The chairs were arranged in perfect rows, divided by a long white runner that led to an arch covered in white roses and trailing greenery. A string quartet played classical music that floated through the air like something from a fairy tale. This was the wedding Cassandra had always dreamed of. Everything perfect, everything expensive, everything designed to announce that she had arrived in a world far above the one she'd come from. And her mother, the woman who had made all of this possible through years of sacrifice, was standing alone by the guest book table, trying not to cry. The ceremony. At precisely 4 p.m., the wedding coordinator, a brisk woman in all black with a headset and clipboard, began directing guests to take their seats. I waited, unsure where I should go or what I should do. "Are you family of the bride or groom?" the coordinator asked me. "Bride, I'm her mother." The coordinator consulted her clipboard, her finger running down a list. "Eleanor Fitzgerald?" "Yes." You'll be escorted down the aisle right before the wedding party enters. If you'll wait right here, your escort will come for you in about 5 minutes. Relief washed over me. I would walk down the aisle. I would be acknowledged as Cassandra's mother, at least in this one moment. But as I watched other guests being seated, my relief began to curdle into something else. Vivian Pemberton appeared at the entrance to the ceremony space, looking radiant in her champagne gown. She was on the arm of a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, presumably Derek's father, Gregory Pemberton. Together, they walked down the aisle while the string quartet played something beautiful and soaring, and every head turned to watch them. They were seated in the front row on the groom side, and there was something almost royal about the way other guests watched them. The murmurs of admiration, the clear respect, and even reverence that attended their presence. That should have been me, I thought, walking down that aisle with all eyes on me, being seated in a place of honor, being recognized as the reason this day was possible. Instead, when my escort finally arrived, a young groomsman who looked barely out of college and clearly had no idea who I was, we walked down the aisle quickly, almost perfunctorily. The music didn't change. People barely looked up. And when we reached the front, he led me not to the front row on the bride's side where I should have sat, but to the third row. The third row, behind 2 rows of people I didn't recognize. I sat down in stunned silence, watching as bridesmaids began their procession down the aisle, each one gliding gracefully in their emerald gowns. 6 bridesmaids, none of whom were family, all of whom were Cassandra's friends from her Seattle life. The music changed, swelling into the wedding march, and everyone stood.
Cassandra appeared at the entrance, and despite everything, despite all the hurt and confusion and exclusion, my breath caught. She was absolutely beautiful. Her dress was a stunning creation of lace and silk, fitted through the bodice and flowing into a dramatic train. Her dark hair was swept up in an intricate style with small white flowers woven throughout. She looked like a princess from a storybook. She walked down the aisle alone. There was no one to give her away since her father was gone, and I had apparently not been asked to fill that role either. She moved with confidence and grace, her eyes fixed on Derek, who stood at the altar watching her with clear adoration. I should have been crying with joy. Instead, I cried with a grief that felt like mourning. The ceremony was beautiful and traditional. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves. Derek's voice cracked with emotion when he promised to love Cassandra for the rest of his life. Cassandra smiled radiantly throughout, never once looking back to where I sat, invisible in the third row. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife and they kissed to enthusiastic applause, I clapped along with everyone else, my hands moving mechanically while my heart broke a little more. The recessional music began, and the newly married couple walked back down the aisle, beaming and waving to guests. Behind them came the wedding party, paired up, bridesmaids with groomsmen, all of them laughing and joyful. And I sat in the third row, waiting for permission to leave. The reception. The cocktail hour took place in the Manor's conservatory, a glass-enclosed space with soaring ceilings and views of the manicured gardens beyond. Waiters circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres that were tiny works of art, seared scallops on delicate spoons, beef carpaccio with shaved truffle, little pastry cups filled with caviar. I took a glass of champagne from a passing tray and found a quiet corner, watching the other guests mingle and laugh. Everyone seemed to know each other. They formed clusters of conversation, talking about people and places I'd never heard of, laughing at inside jokes I couldn't understand. I'd never felt more alone in a crowded room. Eleanor Fitzgerald? I turned to find a woman about my age, with gray hair cut in a practical bob and wearing a simple but elegant dress. Her face was kind and open, with smile lines around her eyes. Yes? I said cautiously. I'm Dorothy Chen. I live next door to your sister Ruth in Riverside Heights. She's mentioned you many times. I didn't realize you'd be here. Ruth said she wasn't invited. The mention of my sister, the acknowledgement that I wasn't just a random guest, but someone with connections and family, made tears spring to my eyes again. Ruth wasn't invited, I confirmed quietly. Just me. Dorothy's expression shifted to understanding and sympathy. I'm here because my company did some legal work for Pemberton Industries. I barely know the groom. She paused. Would you like some company? You look like you could use a friendly face. I nodded, not trusting my voice. We talked for the next 20 minutes, and Dorothy's kindness was like water in a desert. She didn't ask painful questions or make awkward comments about the wedding. She just talked about Riverside Heights, about her garden and Ruth's latest volunteer project at the library, about normal, everyday things that reminded me there was a world outside this painful afternoon. But eventually the bell chimed to signal that the reception was beginning, and we had to find our seats. I'll look for you afterwards, Dorothy promised, squeezing my hand. Don't let this day defeat you. The reception was held in the Manor's Grand Ballroom, a space that looked like something out of a palace. Round tables dressed in white linens with tall centerpieces of white flowers and candles, a parquet dance floor that gleamed under chandeliers, a sweetheart table for the bride and groom, elevated slightly on a platform so everyone could see them. And, near the entrance, a seating chart displayed on an elegant board with calligraphy. I found my name and felt my stomach drop. Table 14. I scanned the chart, trying to understand the logic. Tables 1 to 4 were clearly family and wedding party. Tables 5 to 8 appeared to be Derek's business associates and Vivian's social circle. Tables 9 through 13 seemed to be Cassandra's coworkers and friends. And then, tucked in the back corner near the kitchen entrance, was table 14. I walked across the ballroom on legs that felt like lead, aware that I was one of the first guests entering, which meant others would see me making this long walk to the least desirable spot in the room. Table 14 was everything I'd feared. The furthest table from the sweetheart table, partially blocked by a decorative column, close enough to the kitchen that I could hear the clatter of dishes and shouted orders from the staff. The other guests at my table trickled in gradually. There was a young couple who introduced themselves as friends of Derek's from his gym, an elderly man who seemed confused about where he was, two middle-aged women who worked in the human resources department at Pemberton Industries and spent most of their time talking to each other, and Dorothy Chen, who found me there and deliberately switched her place card to sit beside me. This is ridiculous, Dorothy muttered, looking around at our isolated corner. You should be at the family table.
Apparently not, I said, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice and failing. From our distant vantage point, I watched the reception unfold like a play I wasn't really part of. I watched Cassandra and Derek make their grand entrance to thunderous applause. I watched them take their first dance, Cassandra's dress swirling as Derek spun her across the floor. I watched Vivian dab at her eyes with an elegant handkerchief while Gregory patted her shoulder, both of them sitting at the head table in the positions that should have included me. Dinner was served, a choice of filet mignon or Chilean sea bass, plated beautifully with artistic drizzles of sauce. It probably tasted wonderful. I wouldn't know. Each bite was ash in my mouth. Then came the toasts. The best man went first, telling stories about Derek's college days that got appreciative laughs from the crowd. The maid of honor followed, sharing touching memories of her friendship with Cassandra, complete with a slideshow of photos projected on a screen. And then Vivian stood up. She walked to the microphone with a champagne glass in hand, her smile gracious and warm. The room fell silent, everyone's attention on her. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice cultured and confident. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Vivian Pemberton, Derek's mother, and I must say this is one of the happiest days of my life. She went on to talk about Derek, about what a wonderful son he'd been, about how proud she was of the man he'd become. She talked about meeting Cassandra and being instantly charmed by her intelligence, her ambition, her grace. When Derek told me he wanted to marry Cassandra, I knew our family was gaining not just a daughter-in-law, but a true daughter, Vivian said, her voice warm with emotion. She has brought such joy into our lives, and I want to welcome her officially into the Pemberton family with all my heart. The room erupted in applause. Cassandra stood at the sweetheart table, tears streaming down her face, and blew a kiss to Vivian. They shared a moment of such obvious affection and connection that it felt like a physical blow to my chest. That should have been me. That should have been my speech, my moment to tell the room about the daughter I'd raised and sacrificed everything for. That should have been my welcome, my blessing, my place at the center of this celebration. Instead, I sat in the back corner near the kitchen doors, and no one asked me to speak. No one acknowledged that I existed. No one seemed to remember that before Cassandra became a Pemberton, she'd been a Fitzgerald, and that name, my name, had meaning too. I excused myself from the table, Dorothy's concerned face the last thing I saw as I fled toward the ladies' room. The breaking point. The bathroom was empty, mercifully, and I locked myself in a stall and finally let myself completely fall apart. Great racking sobs that I'd been holding back all day poured out of me. I cried for the little girl who used to hug me and tell me I was the best mommy in the world. I cried for all the years of sacrifice that apparently meant nothing. I cried for the mother-daughter relationship I thought we'd had, which had apparently been as much an illusion as my seat at the family table. I don't know how long I was in there. Long enough that my eyes were swollen and my carefully applied makeup was completely ruined. Long enough that I'd used up all the tissues in my purse and had resorted to toilet paper. Long enough that I'd moved from crying to that hollow, empty feeling that comes after tears run dry. When I finally emerged from the stall, I splashed cold water on my face and tried to repair the damage, but it was hopeless. I looked like exactly what I was, a heartbroken woman who'd been crying at what should have been a joyful occasion. I couldn't go back to table 14. I couldn't sit there watching everyone else celebrate while I tried to hold myself together. I needed to leave, to go home, to be somewhere I didn't feel like an unwanted stranger. I gathered what was left of my composure and walked out of the bathroom, intending to slip out quietly without anyone noticing my departure. But as I entered the hallway that led back to the ballroom, I nearly collided with a man who was also heading in that direction. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I said automatically. "No harm done," he replied with a kind smile. He was in his mid-60s, distinguished-looking, with silver hair and warm brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His tuxedo was impeccably tailored, and he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone comfortable in formal settings. He looked at my face, which I'm sure showed obvious signs of crying, and his expression shifted to concern. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. The simple kindness in his voice broke something open in me. Fresh tears spilled over. "I'm fine, just emotional. Weddings, you know." He studied me more carefully. "You're the bride's mother, aren't you, Eleanor?" I stared at him in surprise. "How did you know?" "I saw you sitting alone at table 14, he said, his voice carrying a note of disapproval. "And I've been wondering all evening why the mother of the bride was relegated to the back corner while—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully, "while others occupied the places of honor." "You noticed," I said softly, and somehow that simple observation made me want to cry all over again. "I'm Richard Thornton," he said, offering his hand.
Derek's uncle, his father's brother. And I have to tell you, I'm appalled by how you've been treated today. His honesty was startling and refreshing after a day of polite fiction.
It's all right, I said, though we both knew it wasn't. Cassandra has her reasons, I'm sure. She's building a new life, and I suppose the old one doesn't fit anymore. Richard's expression darkened. That's no excuse for erasing the person who made that new life possible. He gestured toward the ballroom. Come with me. Act like we're family, because right now, you look like you could use someone on your side. He offered me his arm with such old-fashioned courtesy that I found myself taking it, letting him escort me back toward the reception like I was someone who mattered. But as we approached the entrance to the ballroom, Richard stopped suddenly. His body went rigid, and he was staring through the doorway at something that had clearly shocked him. "What is it?" I asked, following his gaze. He was looking at the head table, specifically at Vivian Pemberton, who was now standing with Cassandra and Derek, the three of them posing for photographs. "That woman," Richard said slowly, his voice strange, "the one with Cassandra and Derek, the one who's been sitting at the head table all evening giving speeches about being his mother? Yes, that's Vivian Pemberton, Derek's mother." Richard turned to look at me, and his face had gone pale. "No," he said quietly, "that's not Vivian Pemberton. That woman is Vanessa Cortez. She's a real estate broker who's been having an affair with Derek for at least the past year." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what he was telling me. "That's impossible," I managed. "She's been introduced as his mother all day. She gave a speech about being his mother. Cassandra they've been..." The words died in my throat as I watched through the doorway. Vanessa, because now I couldn't think of her as Vivian anymore, had her arm around Cassandra's shoulders, laughing at something Derek had said. They looked like a family, a perfect, happy family celebrating a perfect, happy day. "I know what I'm seeing sounds insane," Richard said, his voice tight. "But I'm absolutely certain. I met Vanessa at a charity auction 6 months ago. She was on Derek's arm, very cozy, very much not behaving like a mother. My wife Paula confronted me afterward, asking if I knew Derek was cheating on his fiancée. I told her I'd speak to my brother Gregory about it." "And did you?" I asked, still staring at the woman who'd dismissed me from the bridal suite, who'd sent me away like unwanted help, who'd sat in the place of honor that should have been mine. "I tried," Richard said bitterly, "but Gregory wouldn't hear it. Said I must have been mistaken, that Derek would never jeopardize his engagement to Cassandra. She's apparently very valuable to him, her marketing connections, her social media influence, something about her being an asset to the Pemberton brand." He shook his head. I dropped it. I thought maybe I had misread the situation, but now, seeing that woman here pretending to be Vivian... "Where is the real Vivian?" I asked, my mind spinning. Richard pulled out his phone, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. "Paula follows her on Instagram. They serve on a charity board together. Let me check." He scrolled for a moment, then turned the phone toward me. The screen showed an Instagram post from an account labeled Vivian_Pemberton_official. The photo was of a serene spa setting with mountains in the background. The caption read, "Day 12 of my wellness retreat at Alpine Serenity Resort in Zurich. Completely off the grid and loving every moment of digital detox and self-discovery. Hashtag mindfulness, hashtag Swiss Alps, hashtag wellness journey." The post was dated 5 days ago. "She's been in Switzerland for 2 weeks," Richard said. "Paula mentioned it at dinner last month. Vivian was excited about this exclusive retreat. No phones, no internet, complete disconnection from the modern world. She paid a fortune for it." My mind raced through the implications. So Derek's real mother is in Switzerland, unreachable, and he's brought his mistress to his wedding, introduced her as his mother, and everyone has just accepted it? "Not everyone," Richard said grimly.
Paula and I weren't invited to the wedding. We received a note saying it was immediate family only, which seemed strange since Derek has dozens of cousins who are clearly here. Now I understand why we were excluded. We're the only ones who would have recognized Vanessa. I leaned against the wall, my legs suddenly unsteady. Does Cassandra know? It was the question I was most afraid to ask and the one that mattered most. Was my daughter a victim of this deception, or was she part of it? Richard's expression was grave. That's what we need to find out. But Elena, I have to tell you something else, and you're not going to like it. I don't like any of this, but gestured for him to continue.
I'm saying that nothing about this wedding is what it appears to be. Derek married Cassandra for a reason that has nothing to do with love. And bringing Vanessa here, disguised as his mother, putting her in that position of authority and respect, that's not just about hiding an affair. That's about control. That's about establishing a dynamic where Vanessa has power over Cassandra from day one. The pieces were clicking into place with sickening clarity. She was in the bridal suite this morning. Vanessa. She dismissed me, told me to check on the guest book table. She's been positioning herself as the matriarch all day, and Cassandra has been deferring to her, trying to please her. Because Cassandra thinks she's her new mother-in-law, Richard said. She thinks she needs to impress Derek's mother to secure her place in the family. She has no idea she's been performing for her husband's mistress. A wave of nausea rolled through me. We have to tell her. We will, Richard said, but we need to be smart about this. If we just walk up and make accusations, Derek will deny it, Vanessa will deny it, and we'll look like crazy people trying to ruin the wedding. We need proof. We need evidence that's undeniable. What kind of evidence? Richard thought for a moment. Photos, documentation, something that proves Vanessa isn't who she claims to be, and we need to find out how deep this goes. Who else knows about this? Is this just Derek and Vanessa, or is it bigger? I felt something hardening inside me, crystallizing from the hurt and confusion into something more useful, determination. For months, I'd been made to feel small, unnecessary, like an embarrassment to my daughter. I'd accepted being excluded, being dismissed, being hidden away in the back corner of her wedding. But this was different. This wasn't about my hurt feelings anymore. This was about protecting Cassandra from something dark and manipulative that she couldn't see because she was too busy trying to fit into a world that was built on lies. Tell me what to do, I said to Richard. He smiled, and there was something fierce in it. First, we document everything. Take photos, make notes. Second, we find out who else is in on this deception. And third, we figure out the best way to tell Cassandra the truth without completely destroying her on what's supposed to be the happiest day of her life. That last part might be impossible, I said quietly. I know, Richard replied, but we have to try. Come on, let's start gathering evidence. The investigation begins. We moved away from the ballroom entrance to a quieter corridor lined with oil paintings of landscapes and antique furniture. Richard pulled out his phone again, this time opening his photo gallery. These are from the charity auction where I saw Derek and Vanessa together, he said, scrolling through images. Paula took them. She's an amateur photographer, always documenting events. He showed me a series of photos from what looked like an elegant evening event. And there, crystal clear in multiple shots, was the woman I'd known all day as Vivian Pemberton. She was wearing a stunning red dress, her hair styled differently, but unmistakably the same person. And in every single photo, she was attached to Derek, her hand on his arm, laughing at something he said, looking up at him with an expression that was definitely not maternal. That's from March, Richard said. 6 months before the wedding. Derek was definitely engaged to Cassandra by then. She'd been posting about wedding planning on social media for months. Can you send me these photos? I asked. Already done, Richard replied, tapping his phone. What's your number? I gave it to him, and moments later my phone buzzed with incoming messages. Hard evidence that Vanessa was not who she claimed to be, that she had a romantic history with Derek that predated today. Now we need to document today, Richard said. The wedding photos, the seating arrangements, everything that establishes how she's been positioned and treated at this event. The photographer has been taking pictures of her with Cassandra and Derek all day, I said, remembering the endless photo sessions I'd witnessed from my distant corner.
Formal portraits, candid shots, everything. That actually works in our favor, Richard pointed out. Those photos will prove that she was presented as Derek's mother to everyone at this wedding. When the truth comes out, there's no way Derek can claim it was just a misunderstanding. We walked back toward the ballroom, but this time, I wasn't walking in as a rejected mother trying to hold herself together. I was walking in with purpose, with an ally, with a mission. The reception was in full swing. The dance floor was crowded with guests moving to upbeat music. Waiters circulated with dessert, tiny works of art on delicate plates. The bar was busy with people ordering drinks and laughing. And at the center of it all, at the sweetheart table on its elevated platform, sat Cassandra and Derek, looking every inch the perfect couple. Vanessa stood nearby, chatting with a group of well-dressed guests, playing her role of proud mother flawlessly. Start with the seating chart, Richard suggested quietly. Photograph it. It shows exactly where you were placed versus where she was placed. I made my way to the entrance area where the seating chart was still displayed. Pretending to check something, I took several clear photos with my phone, making sure to capture both the overall layout and the specific details. Table 1, where Vanessa had sat as mother of the groom, and Table 14, where I'd been relegated. "Excuse me, dear, are you having trouble finding your seat?" I turned to find an elderly woman with white hair and kind eyes, wearing a lavender dress and leaning on a decorative cane.
"Oh, no, I'm fine, thank you. I already found my table earlier," I said, trying to smile. "Table 14, wasn't it?" the woman said, and there was something knowing in her expression. "I'm Beatrice Hartwell. I was seated at table 13, right next to yours. I couldn't help but notice that you were sitting rather far from the family tables, even though you're clearly the bride's mother. I recognized you from the ceremony." The validation from this stranger made my throat tight with emotion. "Yes, I'm Eleanor, Cassandra's mother." Beatrice shook her head disapprovingly. "I've been to a lot of weddings in my 82 years, and I've never seen a mother of the bride treated so poorly. My table was discussing it during dinner. We all thought it was quite shocking." "You were talking about me?" I asked, embarrassed. "We were talking about the rudeness of whoever made the seating arrangements," Beatrice corrected gently. "You should have been at the head table, dear, or at the very least at table 2 or 3 with other important family members. Putting you in the back corner near the kitchen was simply cruel." The fact that strangers had noticed and been bothered by my treatment was somehow both comforting and humiliating. It meant I wasn't crazy to feel hurt. The slight had been obvious enough that others had seen it. But it also meant my humiliation had been public, witnessed by people I didn't even know. "Thank you for saying that," I managed. "It's been a difficult day." Beatrice patted my arm with her free hand. "I suspect it's about to get more difficult, dear. I'm a retired family court judge, and I've seen enough manipulation and control dynamics to recognize them when I see them. Something is very wrong with this wedding, beyond just the seating arrangements. If you need a witness to anything, you come find me. Table 13. She walked away before I could respond, leaving me staring at her in surprise. How much had she seen? What else had she noticed that I'd been too hurt and confused to observe? Richard appeared at my elbow. "Who was that?" "A retired judge who apparently also thinks something is wrong here," I said, still processing the encounter. "Good instincts," muttered Richard. "Come on, let's see if we can get closer to Vanessa. I want to hear what she's telling people." We moved through the crowd, Richard using his position as Derek's uncle to smooth our way through clusters of guests. People greeted him warmly, clearly respecting his place in the family hierarchy, even if he had been mysteriously absent from the guest list until today. "Richard, I didn't know you were coming." A middle-aged woman in a silver dress embraced him enthusiastically. "Paula said you two weren't invited." "Last-minute change of plans," Richard said smoothly. "You know how these things go. Have you met Eleanor, Cassandra's mother?" The woman's eyes widened. "Oh, I'm Sharon Pemberton Clark, Derek's cousin. It's so lovely to meet you finally. Cassandra is absolutely wonderful. You must be so proud." "I am," I said, and it was true despite everything else.
I was just talking to Vivian, Derek's mother, about how beautiful the ceremony was. She's been telling us all about the wedding planning process. Apparently, she and Cassandra have become so close over the past year. Vivian keeps saying how blessed she is to have such a wonderful daughter-in-law. My stomach turned. The woman was not only impersonating Derek's mother, but apparently had been doing so for months, building a fake relationship with Cassandra under completely false pretenses. "How long have you known Vivian?" Richard asked, casually. "Oh, years and years. Gregory brought her to family events all the time before they divorced, though I haven't seen her in person in probably, 3 years? She moved to Europe after the divorce, didn't she? She looks wonderful, though. That wellness retreat in Switzerland must have done wonders for her." Richard and I exchanged glances. Sharon thought she was talking to the real Vivian, someone she hadn't seen in 3 years, which was long enough that her memory could be fooled by someone who looked similar enough and played the part convincingly. "When did you hear about the Switzerland retreat?" Richard asked. "Oh, Vivian mentioned it a few weeks ago at some planning meeting. She was so excited about it, said it would be the perfect preparation for the wedding, though I'm surprised she went so close to the date. But she made it back just in time, obviously." Though she told me she was considering staying longer if the retreat was as good as advertised. I guess she changed her mind. "Or someone changed it for her," Richard murmured to me once Sharon had moved on. "What do you mean?" "I mean that Vanessa has been telling people she's Vivian for weeks, setting up the deception, making sure everyone expects to see her at the wedding. And she told people that Vivian, the real Vivian, might stay longer at the retreat. She was setting up her alibi, making sure that if anyone questioned why Vivian looked or acted a bit different, they'd chalk it up to the time away or the stress of wedding planning." The premeditation of it was staggering. This wasn't a last-minute impulsive deception. This had been carefully planned and executed over weeks, possibly months. "We need to get closer," I said. "I need to hear what she's saying to people, what she's saying to Cassandra." Richard nodded, and we began weaving through the crowd towards where Vanessa stood, near the sweetheart table. As we got closer, I could hear her voice, warm and maternal, with just a hint of refined superiority that I'd heard all day.
"Cassandra, darling, you simply must try the champagne cake," Vanessa was saying to my daughter, who stood beside her looking radiant and happy. "The bakery is one of my absolute favorites. I've been going to them for years." "It's delicious, Vivian," Cassandra said warmly, using the fake name without any suspicion. "Thank you so much for recommending them. And thank you for everything today. I know I haven't said it enough, but having you here, having your support and guidance through all the planning, it's meant the world to me." Vanessa pulled Cassandra into a hug, and over my daughter's shoulder, I saw the woman's face. There was triumph in her expression, a calculating satisfaction that made my blood run cold. She wasn't just playing a role, she was enjoying it. She was enjoying the power, the deception, the control she had over my unsuspecting daughter. "You're part of our family now, darling," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "And I'm going to make sure you understand exactly what that means." There was something threatening in those words, though Cassandra clearly didn't hear it. She just smiled and hugged Vanessa tighter. I must have made some sound, a gasp or a whimper, because suddenly, Cassandra's eyes found mine across the crowd. Our gazes locked, and for a moment, I saw confusion in her expression. She'd probably forgotten I was even there, hidden away at table 14. Out of sight and out of mind. Then her expression shifted to something else. Discomfort, maybe, or irritation that I was standing there, watching her intimate moment with the woman she thought was her new mother-in-law. She pulled away from Vanessa and said something I couldn't hear. Vanessa turned to look at me, and our eyes met. The woman didn't look surprised or uncomfortable. She looked amused. She knew exactly who I was. The real mother, the woman she'd displaced, and she was enjoying it. She said something to Cassandra, still looking at me. And my daughter laughed. They were laughing together. These two women who'd formed a bond built entirely on lies. And I was the joke. Richard's hand on my elbow pulled me back before I could do something foolish like march over there and confront them in front of everyone. Not yet, Richard said quietly. We need more. We need something undeniable. Like what? I asked, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. Like Gregory Pemberton, Richard said grimly. My brother. Derek's father. If anyone knows what's really going on here, it's him. And I think it's time I had a conversation with him about his son's interesting choice of wedding guests. Confronting Gregory. Gregory Pemberton was holding court near the bar, surrounded by men in expensive suits who were laughing at his stories and hanging on his words. He was a tall man, in his late 60s, silver-haired like his brother Richard, but without any of the warmth. His face was handsome in a hard way, all sharp angles and calculating eyes that assessed everyone and everything for potential value or threat. Are you sure you want to do this? I asked Richard as we approached. I've been wanting to have this conversation with my brother for 20 years, Richard said grimly. This just gives me a good excuse. Richard! Gregory's voice boomed as he spotted his brother. I heard you crashed the wedding. Paula couldn't make it. There was something mocking in his tone, an edge that suggested he knew exactly why Richard hadn't been invited and found the entire situation amusing. Paula is at home, disgusted by what's happening here. We need to talk, privately. Gregory's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went cold. It's my son's wedding reception, brother. Hardly the time for private conversations. It's exactly the time. Unless you want me to have this conversation right here in front of all your business associates. The threat hung in the air. Gregory's companions shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension. After a long moment, Gregory's smile became more forced. Gentlemen, if you'll excuse me for just a moment. Family matters. He led us to a quieter corner of the ballroom, near a door that led to a terrace currently closed off for the event. His expression had shifted from jovial to irritated. What is this about, Richard? If you're here to lecture me about not inviting me, who was the woman sitting at the head table? Gregory's face went carefully blank. That's Vivian, Derek's mother, your former sister-in-law. You've met her dozens of times. That's not Vivian, Richard said flatly. That's Vanessa Cortez, Derek's mistress, and you know it. The silence that followed was deafening. Gregory's eyes flicked to me, clearly calculating who I was and how much I knew. Then he smiled, but it was a cold, dangerous expression. You don't know what you saw. I saw Vanessa at a charity auction with Derek 6 months ago. I have photos. Paula documented it. That woman is not my former sister-in-law. And if you try to tell me she is, you're either lying or you're losing your mind. Gregory's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something ugly underneath. You were always self-righteous, Richard. Always standing on your moral high ground, judging the rest of us for doing what was necessary. What was necessary? I heard myself say, my voice stronger than I felt. Bringing your son's mistress to his wedding and having her impersonate his mother? What exactly is necessary about that? Gregory turned his full attention to me for the first time, looking me up and down with obvious disdain. And who are you? I'm Eleanor Fitzgerald, Cassandra's mother, the actual mother who was shoved into the back corner while your son's mistress sat in my place.
Something flickered in Gregory's expression. Recognition, perhaps, or calculation. Ah, yes, Cassandra's mother. I've heard about you. The cleaning woman who worked multiple jobs. Very industrious. The condescension in his voice was like a slap, but I didn't back down. At least I'm who I claim to be, which is more than can be said for the woman sitting at your family's table. Gregory's smile widened, becoming even more unpleasant. You want to know what's necessary? I'll tell you. Vivienne, the real Vivienne, is a drunk. She's been in and out of rehab for years. She's embarrassing, unstable, and completely unreliable. Having her at Derek's wedding would have been a disaster. So we found a solution. A solution, Richard repeated, his voice flat with disbelief. You replaced her with Derek's mistress. We solved multiple problems at once, Gregory said, his voice taking on a lecturing tone as if explaining basic business strategy. Vivienne gets her wellness retreat in Switzerland, which is actually her 4th stint in rehab this year, by the way, where she's safely tucked away and can't embarrass anyone. Vanessa gets to be part of Derek's life publicly, which she's been pushing for, and Derek's new bride gets a mother-in-law who's actually functional and can help guide her into her new role in our family. Her new role, I said slowly, pieces clicking together. What exactly is Cassandra's role in your family, Mr. Pemberton? Gregory looked at me like I was particularly slow. She's an asset. She has an impressive social media following, connections in the marketing world, and a wholesome image that plays well for our company's rebranding efforts. Derek needed a wife who could be the face of the next generation of Pemberton Industries. Cassandra fit the requirements perfectly. The cold calculation in his voice made me feel sick. You're talking about my daughter like she's a business acquisition. That's exactly what she is, a very useful acquisition. And Vanessa's role is to make sure Cassandra understands her place in this family, understands what's expected of her, and doesn't get any ideas about having more power or autonomy than we're willing to grant her. By pretending to be her mother-in-law, by establishing a relationship built entirely on lies and manipulation, by establishing appropriate control. Cassandra thinks she married into a loving family where she'll be cherished and respected. What she actually married into is a business arrangement where she's expected to perform certain functions and maintain certain appearances. Vanessa is there to make sure she understands that, while keeping her happy enough that she doesn't cause problems. And what about when Vivienne comes back from Switzerland? I demanded. What happens when Cassandra meets Derek's real mother? Gregory shrugged. Vivienne knows better than to contradict the family narrative. She's been well compensated for her cooperation. And if she does cause problems, well, she has enough addiction issues that no one will believe her anyway. It's all been very carefully arranged. I stared at this man, this cold, calculating man who had orchestrated an elaborate deception at his own son's wedding, and felt something inside me shift. This wasn't just about my hurt feelings anymore. This wasn't even just about the lies being told today. This was about my daughter being trapped in a marriage to a family of sociopaths who saw her nothing more than a tool to be used and controlled. Does Derek love her at all? I asked quietly. Gregory actually laughed. Love? Derek understands that marriage is a strategic partnership. I'm sure he's fond of Cassandra. She's attractive, intelligent, useful. But love? He shook his head. That's a fairy tale we leave for the poor and naive. Cassandra believes in that fairy tale, I said, my voice shaking. She believes she married someone who loves her. She thinks she's been welcomed into a family that values her. And as long as she continues to believe that and perform her role accordingly, everyone will be happy. The only problem here are you two, he gestured at Richard and me, who seem determined to cause trouble where there doesn't need to be any. There needs to be truth, Richard said firmly. Cassandra deserves to know who she really married, who she really tied herself to. Why? Gregory challenged. So she can what? Leave Derek, cause a scandal, ruin her own reputation and prospects along with his? She signed a prenuptial agreement, you know. If she leaves Derek in the first 5 years, she gets nothing. Not the lifestyle, not the connections, not the social status she's worked so hard to achieve. She'd go back to being nobody from nowhere, the cleaning woman's daughter trying to climb above her station.
The cruelty of it stole my breath. They'd trapped her. Legally, financially, socially, they'd built a cage around my daughter before she even realized she needed to escape. "You are a monster," I said to Gregory, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. He smiled. "I'm a realist, and if you try to tell Cassandra any of this, you'll be the one who looks like a monster. You'll be the bitter mother trying to ruin her daughter's happiness out of jealousy. You'll be the one who destroys her perfect day and her perfect marriage with crazy accusations that you can't prove." "We can prove it," Richard said, pulling out his phone. "We have photos of Vanessa with Derek from months ago. We have documentation that the real Vivienne is in Switzerland. We have witnesses."
And I have a team of lawyers who will bury you in litigation before you can say defamation, Gregory countered smoothly. "Not to mention, what exactly do you think you'll accomplish? Cassandra is already married. The documents are signed. The deed is done. All you'll do is hurt her and embarrass yourself." He started to walk away, then paused and looked back at me. "You know what your real problem is, Eleanor? You raised your daughter to want more than you could give her. You taught her to dream big, to reach for a life of luxury and status. Well, she got it. This is what that life costs. This is what it looks like at the top. If you can't handle seeing behind the curtain, maybe you should have stayed in your corner at table 14 where you belonged." He walked away, disappearing into the crowd of wedding guests who were still dancing and drinking and celebrating, completely unaware of the rot at the center of this perfect event. I stood there, shaking with rage and horror and a deep, aching sadness for my daughter who had no idea what she'd just gotten herself into. "We're still telling her," I said to Richard, my voice steady despite my trembling hands. "I don't care what Gregory says. Cassandra deserves to know the truth." Richard nodded grimly. "Agreed, but we need to be smart about how we do it. And we need to do it soon, before this reception ends and everyone scatters. Once that happens, it'll be much harder to prove what happened here today." "Then let's find proof even Gregory can't deny," I said, straightening my shoulders. "Starting with the one person who's been watching all of this and might actually be willing to help us." "Who?" Richard asked. "Beatrice Hartwell," I said, "the retired judge at table 13 who told me something was very wrong here. If she's been observing this situation with a legal eye, she might have noticed things we missed. And having a judge as a witness would make it a lot harder for Gregory's lawyers to dismiss us as crazy troublemakers." Richard's expression shifted to something like respect. "You're tougher than you look, Eleanor." "I'm a mother," I said simply, "and someone is hurting my child. That makes me very tough indeed." We set off through the crowd, looking for an elderly woman in lavender with a cane who might just be the ally we desperately needed. But as we moved through the dancing, laughing guests, I couldn't help glancing back at the sweetheart table where Cassandra sat beside Derek, her hand in his, her face glowing with happiness. She had no idea that her perfect day was built on lies, that her husband saw her as an asset rather than a partner, that the woman she'd been trying to impress all day was her husband's mistress in disguise. And in a few hours, I was going to have to destroy every illusion she had about her marriage, her husband, and her new life. Because as much as it would hurt her, the truth was the only gift I had left to give. Finding Beatrice Hartwell in the crowded ballroom proved easier than expected. The elderly woman was still at table 13, now sitting with Dorothy Chen, who had befriended me earlier. The two women were deep in conversation, their heads bent close together, and both looked up as Richard and I approached. "Eleanor," Dorothy said warmly, but her expression was concerned. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse than a ghost," I said, sinking into an empty chair at their table. My legs were shaking from the confrontation with Gregory, from the weight of everything I'd learned. "I've seen the truth, and it's absolutely horrifying." Beatrice studied me with sharp, intelligent eyes. "I told you something was wrong with this wedding. What did you discover?" I glanced at Richard, who nodded. We needed allies, and these two women had already shown more concern for my well-being than my own daughter had all day. The woman sitting at the head table, the one who's been introduced as Derek's mother all day, she's not his mother. She's his mistress. Derek's real mother is in Switzerland at a rehab facility, and they've brought this other woman to impersonate her. The silence that followed was absolute. Dorothy's mouth dropped open in shock. Beatrice's expression darkened with something that looked like professional fury. That's identity fraud, possibly multiple other crimes, depending on what legal documents she's signed or what authority she's claimed. How certain are you of this? Completely certain, Richard said, introducing himself properly. I'm Derek's uncle. I've met his real mother dozens of times over 30 years. The woman at that table is Vanessa Cortez. I have photographic evidence of her with Derek at social events as his romantic partner. My wife documented it. Beatrice's eyes glittered with the same determination I'd seen on judges on television shows. Show me everything. For the next 10 minutes, Richard and I laid out everything we'd discovered. The photos from the charity auction showing Vanessa with Derek in an obviously romantic context, the Instagram posts proving the real Vivian Pemberton was in Switzerland, the statements from people who hadn't seen Vivian in years and were therefore fooled by Vanessa's impersonation, and finally, Gregory Pemberton's cold confession about the entire scheme being deliberate and calculated. Dorothy listened with increasing horror, her hand pressed to her chest. But Beatrice took notes on her phone, her expression becoming more formidable with each new piece of information. This is systematic fraud, Beatrice said when we'd finished, and your daughter is the primary victim. Has anyone obtained anything of value based on Vanessa's false identity? Money, contracts, legal authority? I don't know, I admitted. But Gregory said Vanessa's role is to control Cassandra, to make sure she understands her place in the family and doesn't get ideas about having real power or autonomy. Control through deception, Beatrice murmured, still typing notes. That's psychological abuse. Combined with the prenuptial agreement you mentioned, which was signed under false pretenses if Cassandra believed she was marrying into a different family dynamic than actually exists, we might be looking at grounds for annulment rather than just divorce. Hope sparked in my chest. Annulment? You mean the marriage could be invalidated? Possibly, Beatrice said carefully, if we can prove that Cassandra's consent to the marriage was obtained through fraud, that she was deliberately misled about material facts regarding her husband and his family, a court might rule the marriage void. But that's complicated and would require significant evidence and legal maneuvering.
First things first, Dorothy interjected, her voice shaking slightly. We need to tell Cassandra what's happening. She's sitting over there thinking she just married her Prince Charming, and every moment we wait, she's being deceived and manipulated. We can't just walk up and tell her in the middle of her reception, I said, though everything in me wanted to do exactly that. She won't believe us. She'll think I'm the bitter mother Gregory accused me of being, trying to ruin her happiness. Then we need to create a situation where she can't deny the evidence, Richard said. We need to force the truth into the open in a way that's undeniable. Beatrice leaned back in her chair, her fingers drumming on the table as she thought. We need Vivian. The real Vivian. If she were to appear here or even video call in, the deception would be immediately obvious to everyone. She's at a wellness retreat in Switzerland with no phone or internet, I said. Complete digital detox. That's the whole point. Every facility has emergency contact procedures, Beatrice countered. If we can reach the retreat administrators and explain that there's a family emergency requiring immediate contact with Vivian Pemberton, they would allow communication. Richard was already pulling out his phone. I know the name of the retreat. Paula mentioned it. Alpine Serenity Resort in Zurich. Let me search for contact information. While Richard searched, I felt my phone buzzing my purse. Pulling it out, I saw a text message from an unknown number. Mrs. Fitzgerald, this is James Chen, Dorothy's husband. She just texted me about what's happening at the wedding. I'm a private investigator. I can be at Silverstone Manor in 45 minutes with equipment to document everything. Do you want my help? I showed the message to the group. Dorothy smiled grimly. James specializes in fraud investigations. If anyone can gather legally admissible evidence quickly, it's him. Yes, I typed back immediately. Please come. We need all the help we can get. I found the retreat, Richard announced, showing his phone screen. Alpine Serenity Resort. They have a 24-hour emergency contact line for guests' families. I'm calling now. We all leaned in as Richard dialed, putting the call on speaker. After several rings and navigating through a menu in German and English, a professional female voice answered. Alpine Serenity Resort Emergency Family Contact Line. How may I assist you? My name is Richard Thornton. I need to speak to one of your guests urgently, Vivian Pemberton. There's a family emergency regarding her son. One moment, please, Mr. Thornton. I need to verify your identity and relationship to Miss Pemberton. Richard provided his information, explaining he was Vivian's former brother-in-law and the uncle of her son, Derek. The verification process took several minutes of tense waiting. Mr. Thornton, I show that Miss Pemberton has listed you as an authorized emergency contact. However, I must inform you that she is currently in a meditative session as part of her treatment program. Interrupting this could be counterproductive to her recovery. Is this truly an emergency? Her son is getting married today, Richard said carefully, and there's a situation at the wedding that requires her immediate attention. Someone is impersonating her, and we need Vivian to help us resolve this before serious legal and personal damage is done. There was a long pause. Someone is impersonating Miss Pemberton? Yes, at her son's wedding, pretending to be the mother of the groom, speaking to guests, giving toasts, having photographs taken, all while fraudulently using her identity. That's extremely concerning. The woman's voice had shifted from professional neutral to genuinely alarmed. I will retrieve Miss Pemberton immediately and have her call this number. Please expect contact within 10 minutes. The call ended, and we all looked at each other with a mixture of hope and anxiety. 10 minutes, Dorothy said, and then we'll have the real Vivian as our witness. Assuming she's willing to help, I cautioned. Gregory said she's been compensated for her cooperation. What if she refuses to contradict the family narrative? Then we document that refusal too, Beatrice said grimly. At this point, every piece of evidence matters, including evidence of conspiracy and cover-up. The next 10 minutes felt like hours. We sat at table 13, trying to look like we were just chatting casually while actually watching the head table where Vanessa continued to play her role flawlessly. She was currently dancing with Derek, the two of them moving across the floor while wedding guests applauded and took photos. Cassandra stood nearby with a group of bridesmaids, laughing at something, completely unaware that her husband was dancing with his mistress while pretending it was an innocent mother-son dance. This is grotesque, Dorothy muttered, watching the scene. How can they do this to her? She looks so happy, so innocent. Because to them, she's not a person with feelings, I said quietly. She's an asset, a tool. Gregory said it explicitly. She's useful for her social media presence and marketing connections. That's all she is to them. My phone rang, making all of us jump. An international number. Richard's phone rang simultaneously. The retreat was calling us both. Mrs. Fitzgerald, Richard Thornton, this is Vivian Pemberton. The voice was similar to Vanessa's, same general pitch and tone, but different in subtle ways. There was a fragility to it, a trembling quality that spoke of stress and exhaustion. This was a woman in recovery, a woman who'd been through hell, not the confident, commanding presence Vanessa had projected all day. Vivian, Richard said urgently, thank God, we have a serious situation. Are you aware that your son is getting married today? Married? Vivian's voice cracked. No, that can't be right. Derek told me the wedding was postponed until next spring. He said Cassandra wanted more time to plan, that they'd pushed everything back. That's why I agreed to extend my time here at the retreat, because I wouldn't be missing the wedding. Richard and I exchanged horrified glances. They'd lied to Vivian too. Deliberately kept her away so she wouldn't interfere with their scheme.
The wedding is happening right now, Richard said, at Silverstone Manor in Seattle. And Vivian, there's someone there pretending to be you. Someone impersonating you to all the guests, sitting at the family table, giving mother of the groom speeches, posing for official photographs. The sound that came through the phone was something between a gasp and a sob. What? Who? Why would someone... We believe it's Vanessa Cortez, Richard said gently. His companion. She's impersonating you at his wedding, and we think it's part of a larger deception targeting Derek's new bride. Vanessa, Vivian breathed, and there was such pain in her voice. That woman has been trying to insert herself into my place for over a year. Derek kept promising me he'd ended things with her, that she was just a business associate. And Gregory, her voice hardened, Gregory told me I needed to stay away, that my presence at the wedding would be disruptive, that I needed to focus on my recovery. He paid for this extended retreat. I thought he was being supportive, but he was just getting me out of the way. Vivian, I'm so sorry, I said, my heart breaking for this woman I'd never met. But we need your help. Cassandra, Derek's bride, has no idea what's happening. She thinks she married into a loving family. She thinks Vanessa is you, and she's been trying all day to win your approval and acceptance. Cassandra, Vivian repeated. I've never even met her. Derek kept saying he'd bring her to visit, but there was always an excuse. I've only seen her in photos he sent. She looked kind. She looked genuine. A pause. She deserves so much better than this family. Will you help us expose this? Richard asked. Will you talk to her? Let her see that you're the real Vivian and that she's been deceived. There was a long silence. Then Vivian's voice came back stronger, with an edge of steel underneath the fragility. Yes. Absolutely yes. I may be a mess. I may have failed as a mother in many ways, but I will not let that woman steal my identity and use it to hurt an innocent person. What do you need me to do? Beatrice leaned forward. Miss Pemberton, my name is Beatrice Hartwell. I'm a retired family court judge. With your permission, I'd like to record this conversation as evidence of identity fraud. I'd also like to arrange a video call between you and Cassandra so she can see the real you and understand what's been done to her. Record whatever you need, Vivian said firmly. And yes, I'll video call with Cassandra. But I need to warn you, Gregory and Derek will fight this. They'll claim I'm unstable, that I'm making things up, that I'm the one lying. Gregory has been building that narrative about me for years. We have other evidence, I assured her. Photographs, witness statements, documentation. You're not alone in this. Then let's do it, Vivian said. Let's expose these bastards for what they really are.
Oh my God, Sharon whispered. The woman here tonight isn't Vivian. Who is she? Her name is Vanessa Cortez, Richard said, and she's been impersonating your aunt at your cousin's wedding. Sharon's face went through a rapid series of emotions: shock, confusion, anger, and then something that looked like pieces clicking into place. The way she kept avoiding certain people, the way she claimed she couldn't remember certain family events. I thought it was strange, but I attributed it to age or stress or the time away. But she wasn't misremembering. She never experienced those events because she's not Vivian. We need you to make a statement, Beatrice said, having followed us to document this conversation. A formal statement that you've known Vivian Pemberton for years, that the woman at this wedding is not her, and that you were deceived by a deliberate impersonation. Sharon noted, her face pale. Absolutely. This is fraud. This is criminal. And Cassandra? She looked toward where my daughter stood, still radiant and happy in her white dress. Does she know? Not yet, I said, but she's about to. James had continued his methodical documentation and now approached with his camera. I've got clear footage of Vanessa claiming to be Vivian Pemberton. Multiple instances of her introducing herself as Derek's mother, accepting congratulations in that role, and behaving as though she has maternal authority. That's documented identity fraud. We have the real Vivian Pemberton on standby for a video call. Once we have all our evidence compiled, we confront them. Not just them, I said, an idea crystallizing in my mind. The whole reception. This deception has been performed in front of 200 witnesses. The truth needs to be revealed in front of those same witnesses. Beatrice smiled grimly. A public confrontation. I like it. It prevents them from spinning the narrative later, from claiming this was all a private family misunderstanding. With 200 witnesses, the truth becomes undeniable. Won't that humiliate Cassandra, having her wedding exposed as a fraud in front of everyone? Dorothy asked worriedly. Staying silent will humiliate her more, I said, though the words hurt to speak.
Every day she spends married to Derek, every social media post she makes about her happy new life, every moment she performs this lie, that's worse than the embarrassment of the truth coming out. At least if we do this now, she can annul the marriage and escape before she's trapped for years in a relationship built entirely on deception. And the prenuptial agreement becomes void. If the marriage itself is fraudulent, any contracts signed as part of that marriage are also potentially invalid. She won't be trapped by the 5-year clause Gregory mentioned. That decided it. We would expose this fraud publicly, immediately, and give Cassandra the chance to escape before the cage door locked completely. How do we do this? I asked, looking at the group that had become my unlikely allies. What's the best way to reveal the truth? James considered for a moment. The microphone. Whoever controls the sound system controls the narrative. If we can get access to the microphone during the reception, we can make the announcement before anyone can stop us. They're about to cut the cake, Dorothy observed, pointing to where staff members were wheeling out an elaborate 5-tier wedding cake. That's usually when the bride and groom make final thank you speeches. If we wait until after that, we can request the microphone for a special announcement. Or we could interrupt the cake cutting, Richard suggested darkly. Make it impossible for them to ignore or dismiss us. We need to do this correctly, Beatrice cautioned. If we handle this poorly, we risk looking like we're the ones causing chaos rather than exposing wrongdoing. We need to be calm, factual, and undeniable. Let the evidence speak for itself. We watched as Cassandra and Derek approached the cake, posed for photos, and made the ceremonial first cut while guests applauded and cheered. Vanessa stood nearby, beaming like a proud mother, completely unaware that her deception was about to be explosively revealed. My heart ached watching Cassandra's joy. In a few minutes, that joy would be shattered. Her perfect day would become a nightmare. Her marriage would be exposed as a fraud. Everything she thought she knew about her new life would be proven false. But it had to be done. Because the alternative, letting her spend years or decades trapped in this web of lies, was unthinkable. "I'll do it," I said quietly. "I'll be the one to make the announcement. She's my daughter. This should come from me." Richard placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're sure?" "No," I admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway, because that's what mothers do. We protect our children even when it costs us everything." The confrontation. The cake cutting concluded with cheers and applause. The DJ announced that the dance floor would reopen shortly, that guests should enjoy dessert and the open bar. The reception was moving into its final phase, the point where people would start gradually leaving, where the magical bubble of the wedding day would begin to deflate. If we were going to act, it had to be now. I approached the DJ booth, my heart hammering so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. The DJ, a young man with headphones around his neck, looked up with a professional smile. "Can I help you?" "I need to make an announcement," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm the mother of the bride." His smile widened. "Of course. Would you like to make a toast? We can set that up. Let me just check with the wedding coordinator." "No," I interrupted. "I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you I need the microphone now."
Something in my tone made him pause. He looked past me to where Richard, Beatrice, James, and Dorothy stood in a united front, all watching with determined expressions. "Ma'am, I can't just hand over the equipment without authorization from—" "I'm authorizing it," Beatrice said, stepping forward with all the commanding presence of a judge who'd spent decades in courtrooms. "Unless you want to be complicit in documented fraud, you'll provide that microphone immediately." The DJ looked between us, clearly out of his depth and unsure how to handle this situation. Finally, he handed me the microphone. "It's live," he said nervously. "The whole sound system is connected." I took the microphone, its weight suddenly seeming immense in my hand. This was it. the point of no return. Once I spoke, there was no taking it back, no pretending everything was fine, no protecting Cassandra from the truth. But I'd spent my whole life protecting Cassandra. I'd protected her from poverty, from the stigma of having a dead father, from knowing how many meals I'd skipped so she could eat well, from understanding how many dreams I'd deferred so hers could come true. This was the last protection I could offer her, protection from living a lie. I pressed the button on the microphone, and the conversations throughout the ballroom began to quiet, as people realized someone was about to speak. "Good evening, everyone," I said, and my voice echoed through the space, amplified and impossible to ignore. "My name is Eleanor Fitzgerald. I'm Cassandra's mother." Faces turned toward me. Cassandra's eyes found mine from across the room, her expression shifting from surprise to confusion to something that looked like dread. "I'm sorry to interrupt this beautiful celebration, but I've discovered something tonight that I cannot, in good conscience, stay silent about. Something that affects every person in this room, but most especially my daughter." "What are you doing?" Derek's voice cut across the room. He was moving toward me, his face darkening with anger. "Someone take that microphone away from her." "Let her speak," Beatrice commanded, stepping in front of Derek to block his path. "Or would you prefer we call the police to handle this instead?" Derek stopped, clearly calculating his options. Gregory was also moving through the crowd, his expression murderous. "Mom, please." Cassandra's voice was pleading. She looked mortified, confused, desperate for me to stop whatever was happening. "Especially today," I said gently, my heart breaking at the pain I was about to cause her. "Cassandra, I need you to listen to me. I need everyone to listen. The woman who has been introduced to you all as Vivian Pemberton, Derek's mother, is not who she claims to be." Shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. Vanessa's face went carefully blank, but I saw the flash of panic in her eyes. "Her real name is Vanessa Cortez. She is not Derek's mother. She is his mistress. Derek's actual mother, the real Vivian Pemberton, is currently at a rehabilitation facility in Switzerland. She was deliberately kept away from this wedding so this woman could impersonate her." The murmuring grew louder. Guests were looking at Vanessa with shock and confusion. Some were pulling out their phones, presumably to fact-check what I was saying. "That's a lie," Derek said, but his voice was less certain now. "Those photos are old, dating from before I met Cassandra. Vanessa and I dated briefly years ago. That doesn't mean... It means you brought your ex-girlfriend to your wedding and had her pretend to be your mother," I interrupted. "But it's worse than that. We have testimony from family members who knew the real Vivian Pemberton and can confirm this woman is not her. We have documentation of where the real Vivian is right now, and most importantly..." I nodded to Beatrice, who held up a tablet connected to a video call. On its screen, clearly visible even from a distance, was a woman who looked similar to Vanessa, but distinctly different. The real Vivian Pemberton. We have Vivian herself, ready to speak to anyone who doubts this. The ballroom erupted into chaos. People were shouting questions, demanding explanations. Vanessa was backing away from the crowd, her confident facade crumbling. Gregory was trying to get to the microphone, but several guests, including Sharon Pemberton Clark, had blocked his path. But I only cared about one person. Cassandra stood frozen in the middle of the ballroom, still in her beautiful white dress, looking between me, Derek, Vanessa, and the screens showing evidence of betrayal. Her face had gone completely white. "Cassandra, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you're learning this way, in front of everyone. But you needed to know. You married a man who sees you as a business asset, not a partner. You married into a family that planned to control and manipulate you. This whole day, this whole relationship, it's been built on lies."
"No," Cassandra whispered. But I could see in her eyes that she was already replaying moments from the day, from the courtship, seeing them in a new and horrible light. No, that can't be true. Derek loves me. We're married. We're happy. Are you? I asked gently. Or are you performing happiness because that's what you think you're supposed to do? Derek grabbed Cassandra's arm, pulling her close. Don't listen to her, Pass. She's trying to ruin our wedding because she's jealous, because she couldn't give you the life I can give you. We'll get through this together. But Cassandra was looking at Vanessa. You're not his mother? Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it, then seemed to make a decision. I love him, she said, and there was defiance in her voice. I've loved Derek for 2 years. I'm the one who understands him, who supports his ambitions, who should have been standing beside him today. You're just what? Cassandra's voice was deadly quiet. Just his wife? Just the woman he married under false pretenses? Just the fool who believed everything she was told? You were convenient, Vanessa continued, and there was cruelty in her smile now. You had the right image, the right connections, the right innocent appeal for the company's rebrand. Derek needed a wife who looked good in photos and didn't ask too many questions. I'm sorry you thought it was more than that. The ballroom was utterly silent now. Everyone was watching this confrontation, watching a marriage implode in real time. Cassandra turned to Derek, and I could see her desperately searching his face for denial, for reassurance, for any sign that what Vanessa was saying wasn't true. But Derek's expression was cold and calculated. He wasn't even trying to pretend anymore. Think carefully, Cassandra. You signed a prenup. If you walk away from this marriage within 5 years, you get nothing. No money, no connections, no social standing. You'll go back to being nobody. Is that really what you want? To throw away everything over your mother's conspiracy theories? They're not theories, Cassandra said, her voice shaking. The photos are real. The video call with your actual mother is real. This woman, she gestured at Vanessa, has been pretending to be your mother all day, and you let her. You helped her. You orchestrated this. I did what was necessary. My real mother is an embarrassment, an unreliable drunk who would have ruined our wedding. Vanessa stepped in to fill that role, and she did it perfectly. No one was hurt. Everyone had a beautiful day. This only becomes a problem because your mother couldn't stay in her corner where she belonged. The words hung in the air like poison, and I watched as something fundamental shifted in Cassandra's expression. The desperate hope died, replaced by clarity and anger. My mother, Cassandra said, slowly, spent her entire life sacrificing for me. She worked 2 jobs to put me through college. She went without so I could have everything. She loved me unconditionally, even when I was too blind and selfish to appreciate it. I pulled off her wedding rings, the engagement ring and the brand new wedding band, and held them out to Derek. I would rather be nobody with integrity than somebody living a lie. Derek didn't take the rings. You'll regret this. You'll lose everything. No, Cassandra said, her voice strong despite the tears streaming down her face. I already lost everything, my self-respect, my values, my relationship with my mother, trying to become someone worthy of your fake family. I'm not losing any more. She dropped the rings on the floor between them and walked toward me. The crowd parted to let her through, everyone watching in stunned silence as the bride crossed the ballroom, still in her wedding dress. When she reached me, Cassandra's face crumpled. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything, for how I treated you, for excluding you, for choosing their approval over your love. I was so wrong. I pulled my daughter into my arms, and she collapsed against me, sobbing. All the pain of the day, all the months of rejection and distance dissolved in that moment. She was just my little girl again, hurting and scared and needing her mother. It's okay, I whispered, stroking her hair like I had when she was small. It's going to be okay. We'll get through this together. Behind us, chaos erupted. Gregory was shouting about lawsuits. Derek was trying to salvage the situation with angry denials. Vanessa was being confronted by multiple guests, including Sharon, who was demanding answers. Security was being called. The wedding had transformed into a crime scene investigation. But I didn't care about any of that. I had my daughter back. She was hurt, she was devastated, but she was free. And sometimes freedom is painful before it becomes liberating. Richard appeared at my side. We should go. James has all the evidence documented. Beatrice has statements from multiple witnesses. The real Vivian is working with lawyers in Switzerland to press charges, but you two don't need to stay for this circus. He was right. Cassandra didn't need to stand here while her fraudulent marriage was dissected by 200 witnesses. She needed to leave, to process, to begin healing. Come on, sweetheart, I said gently. Let's go home. I don't have a home, Cassandra brokenly. Everything I have is his. The apartment, the car, everything. You have a home, I corrected. You've always had a home. With me, in Riverside Heights. It's not fancy or impressive, but it's real, and it's yours whenever you need it. Dorothy appeared with Cassandra's coat. Someone had retrieved it from the coat check. James was already coordinating with Beatrice about securing Cassandra's belongings from the apartment she'd shared with Derek. Richard was on the phone with lawyers, arranging for emergency legal protection.
We walked out of Silverstone Manor as a group. Me, Cassandra, Richard, Dorothy, James, and Beatrice. Behind us, the beautiful wedding reception was dissolving into recriminations and revelations. Ahead of us was uncertainty, legal battles, and the difficult process of untangling Cassandra from the life she thought she wanted. But we were walking toward truth, toward freedom, toward the possibility of building something real instead of something beautiful but hollow. Epilogue. 6 months later. The small garden behind my house in Riverside Heights was in full bloom. I'd spent the winter months learning to properly care for it, and now spring had rewarded my efforts with an explosion of color. Roses, tulips, daffodils, and the herbs I'd planted for cooking. Cassandra sat on the back porch steps, her laptop balanced on her knees, working on her new business venture. She'd started her own marketing consultancy, building it slowly and deliberately with clients who valued authenticity over image, substance over social media metrics. It was smaller than what she'd had at Huntington and Reeves, but it was hers, built on her own terms, her own values, her own hard work. She looked different now. Her hair was shorter, styled more simply. She wore jeans and a comfortable sweater instead of designer labels. She smiled more genuinely, laughed more freely, and the constant tension that had lived in her shoulders for years had finally eased. "Mom, look at this," she called to me, turning her laptop screen. "The Bennett account just signed. That's my 5th major client this month." I set down my gardening tools and joined her on the steps, looking at the contract on screen. Pride swelled in my chest, not because of the money or prestige, but because I could see my daughter building something real, something that reflected who she actually was, rather than who she thought she should be. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," I said, squeezing her shoulder. "I couldn't have done it without you," Cassandra replied, covering my hand with hers. "Without you taking me in, supporting me through the annulment process, helping me find myself again. I spent so many years trying to escape being the cleaning woman's daughter, and it turns out that being your daughter was the best thing about me all along." The annulment had been granted 3 months after the wedding that was not. Beatrice had been right. The fraud surrounding the marriage, the deliberate deception about Derek's family situation, and the coercion involved in the prenuptial agreement had been enough to convince the court that Cassandra's consent had not been genuine. The marriage was void, as if it had never happened. Derek and his father Gregory were facing multiple civil lawsuits from guests who'd given expensive gifts based on fraudulent pretenses. Vanessa had been charged with identity fraud and was awaiting trial. The real Vivian Pemberton had entered a more intensive treatment program and was, by all accounts, finally getting the help she needed. And my daughter was healing, slowly,
painfully at times, but genuinely healing. Your Aunt Ruth is coming over for dinner, I mentioned. She wants to hear all about the Bennett account. And Dorothy and James are stopping by afterward with that documentary they've been working on. James and Dorothy had spent the past 6 months creating a documentary about financial fraud targeting young professionals, using Cassandra's story as the central case study. With her permission, they'd interviewed her extensively about the warning signs she had missed, the manipulation tactics that had been used, the way her own ambitions had been weaponized against her. The documentary was scheduled to premiere at a film festival next month. If it went well, it might air on a major streaming platform. Cassandra's story, her humiliation, her awakening, her recovery, might help other young women recognize when ambition was being exploited and when love was really just control. I still can't believe how many people have reached out, Cassandra said, scrolling through messages on her consultancy's social media account. Women who've been through similar situations or who recognize the warning signs in their own relationships because of our story. Some of them have gotten out of bad situations because they heard what happened to me. Pain shared is pain lessened, I said, quoting something Beatrice had told us. And your willingness to be vulnerable, to let people see your mistakes and your recovery, is helping others avoid the same traps. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to birds singing in the garden and the distant sounds of neighborhood children playing. It was peaceful, simple, real. I ran into Derek's cousin Sharon at the grocery store last week, Cassandra mentioned. She apologized again for not seeing through the deception earlier. She said the whole family is fractured now. Some of them sided with Derek and Gregory, insisting we overreacted, but others are horrified by what was done and have cut ties with them completely. How did that make you feel? I asked carefully. We'd been working with a therapist together, learning to communicate honestly about difficult emotions. Sad, Cassandra admitted. Not for Derek. I don't miss him at all, which tells me everything I need to know about that relationship. But sad for what I thought I had. The family I thought I was joining. Even though it was all fake, the grief for losing it is real. Grief for illusions is still grief, I said gently. You're allowed to mourn what you thought you had, even while being grateful you escaped what it really was. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her. My daughter, my complicated, ambitious, imperfect, beautiful daughter, who'd learned the hardest way that authentic love beats artificial prestige every single time.
I never thanked you properly, Cassandra said quietly, for standing up at the wedding, for exposing everything even though you knew it would hurt me. That took incredible courage, Mom. You saved me from a lifetime of misery, even though I couldn't see it at the time. That's what mothers do, I said simply. We protect our children even when they don't want to be protected, even when it costs us their love temporarily. Because real love isn't about being liked, it's about doing what's right, even when it's hard. I love you, Mom, Cassandra said, tears in her voice. I'm sorry it took me so long to appreciate what that means. I love you too, sweetheart, and I never stopped, not even when you pushed me away. We sat there on the porch steps as the afternoon sun slanted through the garden, mother and daughter, rebuilding what had been broken, creating something stronger from the shattered pieces of what had come before. Later that evening, after dinner with Ruth and the documentary viewing with Dorothy and James, after the laughter and the tears and the therapeutic storytelling that came with sharing trauma in a safe space, Cassandra and I found ourselves back in the garden under the stars. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you'd remarried? If you'd focused on your own happiness instead of sacrificing everything for me? I thought about it honestly. Sometimes. But Cass, you were never a sacrifice. You were my purpose, my joy. Yes, I worked hard and went without things, but I also got to watch you grow up. I got to be part of your life. That wasn't a sacrifice. That was a privilege. Even when you were awful to me,
Even when you excluded me from my wedding and treated me like an embarrassment? Even then, I confirmed. Because I knew, somewhere deep down, I always knew that the real you was still in there. The little girl who used to tell me I was the best mommy in the world. The young woman who called me for advice about everything. That person didn't disappear. She just got lost for a while. And I was willing to wait for her to find her way back. I'm back now, Cassandra said firmly, and I'm never losing myself like that again. No relationship, no job, no social status is worth abandoning who I really am. That's the lesson, I agreed. That's what you learned from all of this, and it's a lesson that will serve you for the rest of your life. We stood there in my modest garden, in my small house in an unremarkable neighborhood, with nothing but each other and the truth and the hard-won knowledge that authenticity beats artifice every single time. I'd gone to my daughter's wedding expecting to be a footnote in someone else's fairy tale. Instead, I'd become the hero of a story about courage, truth, and a mother's love that refused to be silenced. And my daughter, she'd lost a wedding, a marriage, a whole imagined future, but she'd gained something far more valuable: herself. 6 months ago, I sat alone crying at Cassandra's wedding, feeling invisible and unwanted. Tonight, I stood in my garden with my daughter beside me, both of us visible, valued, and free. Sometimes the worst days lead to the best outcomes. Sometimes losing everything means gaining what really matters. And sometimes a mother's love is the only truth strong enough to shatter beautiful lies and reveal the path to real happiness. Thank you, Mom, Cassandra said one more time, squeezing my hand, for everything, for loving me enough to tell me the truth even when it was the hardest thing you'd ever done. Always, I promised. I will always love you enough to tell you the truth. That's what real family does. And there, in the garden behind my small house in Riverside Heights, with my daughter's hand in mine and stars shining overhead, I understood something profound. Wealth and status were illusions. Designer dresses and marble estates were temporary, but the bond between a mother and daughter who'd survived hell together, that was forever. That was real. That was enough. Eleanor saved her daughter from a lifetime of deception by having the courage to speak truth when silence would have been easier. She lost nothing real and gained everything that mattered. Have you ever had to tell a painful truth to protect someone you love? Have you ever discovered that what looked perfect on the surface was rotten underneath? Share your story in the comments below. Thank you for following Eleanor and Cassandra's journey. If this story moved you, please share it with others who might need to hear it. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to let the people we care about live a lie. Remember, you are not defined by where you came from, what you own, or who you married. You are defined by your integrity, your courage, and your willingness to choose truth over comfort. Stay strong, stay authentic, and never let anyone make you feel small for being real.